Today we are talking about how to access spiritual dimensions, what you need to know. Now this is important, it's critical because you hear a lot about accessing spiritual dimensions, raising your frequency, raising your consciousness. But what exactly are we talking about? What does it mean? And the thing is you're going to see a lot of this spirituality stuff, a lot of New Agers, a lot of mystical religions talking about it. But they're either very vague or they get things very, very wrong. So this is what you need to know about it. If you ever heard, about accessing spiritual dimensions or raising your frequency, raising your level of consciousness, this is what you need to know, because everywhere else it's going to either be super vague or you're going to get different answers from all over the place, or it's just wrong or missing information. So that's what we're going to talk about. And to be able to really understand this better, I want you to take a quick look at, so there's an article by Alan Liu on medium.com, and it says basic tips on how to access other spiritual dimensions. And this is going to really help illustrate what I mean by this, because if you look at the next sentence here, it says you simply raise your vibration, but because we are unique, what works for one may not resonate with another. And so you see right off the bat, we're going to have a problem here, because you go, okay, what is a spiritual dimension? How do you raise your vibration? So you see the issue here is like, it's super simple. How do you access other spiritual dimensions? You simply raise your vibration. Oh, okay. Well, what does that mean? What is a spiritual dimension? How do you raise your vibration? What's going on here? So the important thing to understand is when we're talking about spiritual dimensions, now you get into New Age and mysticism, they're going to be all over the place. It's going to be really ill-defined. Like, what are you even talking about? What is a spiritual dimension? Now, when we talk about a spiritual dimension, and we're talking about a domain of frequency, a domain of mind, so a mental domain. So really, spirit and mind can be used interchangeably, at least how I talk about it and how I discuss it. That's not true in other systems or in other philosophies or in other traditions. It may be different. But when we're talking about, and often in philosophy, they're used interchangeably, like mind and soul. So if we talk about a mental dimension or a soul dimension or spiritual dimension, really these are all different words for the same thing. We're talking about a domain of frequency. And so when you start to understand it like this, context starts to come into play, because when you say you simply raise your vibration, well, what is a vibration? Is ultimately a frequency. So you could, instead of saying raise your vibration, you could say raise your frequency. So do you see already kind of a connection here between how do you access a spiritual dimension, aka how do you access a frequency domain, aka and then how do you do it? Well, you simply raise your frequency. So we're kind of having connections here, but it's still very vague. It's still not really super clear. Now, I want to say that looking at how they define spiritual dimension, they seem to, it's not really defined at all, but they seem to think of it being anything other than this reality. Like anything else, it seems to be considered a spiritual dimension. That's very, very basic. That's very, there's a lot to reality more than just this particular dimension of space and time, or space-time. And so to declare all other dimensions as spiritual, well, is your dream a spiritual dimension? I mean, it's what a dream is a projection of what would be like a mental dimension. But then this reality is also a projection of a mental dimension. I'm getting ahead of myself here though, so let's look a little more, because this is really critical. And one thing I also want to get across before, I know I said I was going to keep going, but when we're talking about this here, the idea between accessing another dimension, or by the way, accessing another dimension we call tuning, all right? So being able to tune or access another dimension is different than, but related to, raising one's consciousness. Raising one's consciousness is ultimately more important. This ability to tune and access other dimensions is a tool that allows for and develops with the raising of consciousness. So let's continue and we'll see more about this. So this article is basically someone asking the author, Alan, how do you change your consciousness to access different spiritual dimensions? So according to the writer here, basically saying we're constantly changing our consciousness through every moment of the day. What you're interested in is intentionally changing your consciousness to perceive higher frequency dimensions of spiritual reality. And it says the basic technique is to raise your vibration. You can search online for videos and articles with techniques and guided meditations to do that. There are also many people who teach channeling and connecting in other dimensions these days. The numbers are increasing all the time. So it says all the techniques you may come across, including those you have studied, will take you to other dimensions of reality, but they're probably not going to take you to what you're seeking. So the author just continues by saying, I'm a firm believer that every person and soul has their own path. So what might work for me might not work for you. And, there's a lot of teachings on this. And that is the point I want to get across here before I start going on a tirade is that you can see that it's sort of very vague in general, where it's like, oh, well, how you do that is you raise your vibration. How do you raise your vibration? Well, there's many videos out there like meditations and channeling, and you can watch videos on how to do that. But what works for some people doesn't work for others. And it's not that this isn't necessarily untrue. It's missing some very, very important points, and it's very vague. So the idea here is the idea is that there is something much more important than accessing another dimension, and that is raising one's consciousness. Because raising one's consciousness is leveling up in your evolution. It's gaining essentially what is a new ability. If you're accessing another dimension or having an experience of another dimension, you're not necessarily, you're simply having an experience. It's not necessarily going to increase your consciousness or increase your awareness. And it can be a tool to do that. So for example, things like psychedelics, meditation, dreams, these things are, I lost the things on my page here. Let me just bring it up. These are techniques that one can use to have an experience of different domains. Now, as always, I want to say don't do anything dangerous or illegal, and don't feel pressured. You don't have to do psychedelics or anything like that. But that is one tool, as well as meditation and dream work. And what's going on here is that the brain acts as a filter. The brain is a filtering mechanism. So your brain is designed to keep you tuned into this physical reality, the holos. That's what your brain is designed, not literally designed, but has evolved for its function. The function of the brain is for you to be tuned into this reality so that you can survive in this domain of space-time. If the brain was not doing that and allowing other dimensions to leak through, it wouldn't be doing its job. There would be an issue. There would be a problem. Think of it like your brain, like a VR headset, because you're not your brain. You are an eternal being. Your body, your brain is just an avatar. The brain is the hardware, so to speak, that allows you to experience this world. So think of your brain like a VR headset. The VR headset, when you put a VR headset in, the job of that VR headset is to connect you and immerse you into a virtual world that allow you to interact and experience and connect and be immersed in that virtual world. If in that virtual world, other games were starting to bleed through, or things were flickering in and out, and other things, that would be a faulty VR headset. You'd be like, hey, I got to return this thing. It's not working. It's not tuning me into the specific VR world. It's like, well, maybe part of it's broken and light's coming in or whatever. Like, it would be faulty. It would be broken. Your brain is tuned, like the VR headset, to immerse you in this world. Why? Because it has evolved to allow you to survive. And if you weren't doing that, if you weren't tuned into this world and you were having, constant bleeding through of other dimensions and things going on, tiger's going to eat you or something. You'll be too distracted. So the brain is evolved for survival to be able to do this. So the brain is a filtering mechanism. It filters out everything except for that which it is giving you an experience of. So when one is entering into a state that allows one to experience other domains, what's happening is that the filter of the brain is being lifted. Whether that's through a psychedelic, whether that's through entering a meditative state, or whether that's entering into a dream. When you enter into a dream world, what you're doing is tuning. So when you're tuning either into the physical domain of the holos, that's what we call the domain of space-time, or when you go to sleep and dream, you're switching and tuning into your own dream world, your own personal space. And so this is why that liminal space is where one can use to access, possibly, it's not easy, it's very difficult, but experiences of different domains as well, because you're entering into tuning into another space, and that can be a much more malleable area because it's dependent upon your personal thoughts and emotions rather than this world. But I digress. The element here that I want to get across is, if we're understanding, and first of all, we have to make a big difference between a frequency domain and a projection of a frequency domain. A frequency domain is a domain of pattern, and the holos, or a type of domain that you and I are used to, a domain of objects, of beings, like beings that we're used to, that is a spatial temporal dimension, and that is a projection of a frequency domain. So think of a frequency domain as sort of like a domain of pattern, and that pattern projects to become a domain of spatiality. So for example, underlying this domain, the space domain, is its frequency domain. We exist in a projection of it, kind of like a hologram. Not 100% exactly like a hologram, because our hands aren't going through things, but it's very similar to that, where this world is a projection of an informational domain, a domain of pattern. And anyone can kind of understand this who has done psychedelics, whether it's DMT or LSD or something like this. There are different experiences. There can be an experience where it seems like you're in a world of dimensionality, or there can be an experience of just pattern, where it's like a kaleidoscopic imagery. And you can see a difference in these two different experiences, being a frequency domain and a domain of temporality and spatiality. And again, with LSD as well, you can have experiences where you are seeing certain things, or where it's like a pattern and a grid overlays everything, and you're seeing the connectivity and relationships of everything, rather than actual objects or something like that. But it's rather pattern and connection and understanding and that. So there are different types of domains as well, and that's important to understand, because there's a lot to this sort of thing. Once again, I just want to reiterate: don't do anything dangerous and illegal, and don't feel pressured. You don't have to do this stuff to understand this kind of thing. But what important thing, see, this is also important. So in the article, it talks about personal definitions. It says, for example, how do you define the spiritual dimensions that you envision? That's important because your definitions will determine how you measure your success. It says there are many ways to define each dimension. Many people I see on Facebook, for example, say that they are already in a 4D, 5D state of consciousness. Based on their definition, they probably are. Based on other definitions, they clearly aren't. And for anyone who watches my channel for a while, know that I hate when things like 4D and 5D consciousness are brought in, because it's not using the word dimension correctly, and it brings in a lot of confusion. And case in point right here is why it brings in a lot of confusion, because based on their definition, they might be, but based on other definitions, they definitely aren't. Well, not only in the realm of New Age and spirituality do the definitions alter, but that's just not the way a dimension should be understood as well. Because what are you talking about? A state of consciousness, or are you talking about a different domain that one can interact in? Because there's a big difference. And so when you understand, people will talk about 4D and 5D consciousness, and that's a lot different than talking about entering into another dimension with objects and entities, etc. And this confusion of using these words interchangeably and in a bunch of different definitions, you don't want to mix up consciousness with domains. These are different things entirely. It's kind of, okay, here's a good way to understand it. The difference between a VR headset and you. That VR headset can let you tune into different VR worlds, but you, the user, are a subjective entity that can have different levels of consciousness. So likewise, you can have access to different experiences of domains, but has nothing to do with your level of consciousness. I mean, there's some relations, but in general here, you see they're different things. So to start talking about accessing dimensions, but then to start also talking about 4D and 5D consciousness, they're not the same thing. And that's why at least in context of New Age and spirituality, densities are a much, much better term. Densities were originally used, but then New Agers started using the word dimension instead of density because I guess they just thought, oh, well, they both start with D, and maybe they didn't understand what density meant. So, instead of talking about fifth density and fourth density and sixth density, they started talking about fourth dimension, fifth dimension, and sixth dimension because it starts with a D. See, that's what's the big problem with New Age and stuff. They just use words because they think it sounds cool and they don't know what they're talking about. Like, four-dimensional quantum spiritual ascendance or something. That's not how you use dimension. That's not how you use any of those words. Don't mean those things. So, that's an important thing to make that distinction between consciousness and then accessing different domains of experience. And the domains of experience that you may be accessing too may be yourself. When you're seeing these brilliant and beautiful patterns, that very well could be the brilliant and beautiful patterns of the frequency domain associated with your own mind, your own mental patterns. And entities could very well be archetypal representatives within yourself. So that's also another element to it as well. Are you accessing yourself in your mind, or are you accessing some other domain that's beyond just yourself and your mind? So that's another element as well. You see, these are all, the reason why I'm getting into all of this is because if you want to know how to access other dimensions, if you want to know how to raise your consciousness, this whole idea of just like, just raise your vibration and you'll access spiritual dimensions. There's a lot to this sort of thing. People want this stuff to be easy. People want this stuff to be super simple. It's not. Raising your consciousness, reaching a new level of consciousness. If anyone tells you it's easy, they're trying to sell you something. All right. I think I put that in one of my videos called like how to raise your consciousness now or whatever, or something like that. And I said, but the point of that video was, if anyone tells you can just do it now, you can't, but you can start the process now. You can begin the process now. You can take the first step onto that path now. You can't just automatically raise your consciousness. It's not like, it doesn't work that way. This is very, very difficult. Some of the hardest work. But people don't like to hear that. And a lot of New Agers, they just want to sell books or whatever, and make it sound super easy and super simple. It's not super easy. It's not super simple. There's a lot of details to it. But that shouldn't be discouraging. It's exciting. It's a fantastic journey. It can also be a frightening journey. It can also be a challenging journey. It's just a whole nother aspect of life and a whole nother aspect of reality. It's like going from, look at the life and experience of an animal, like a dog or a cat. They have a very rich and vibrant experience. But imagine if that cat or dog suddenly gained the consciousness of a human being. Their whole world would change. It would be like stepping into a new world. The world itself wouldn't have changed, but since they raised their consciousness, there's so much, they have all these concepts they didn't have before. Same thing with stepping into a new awareness. Now, as a human, stepping into whole new concepts, whole new ideas, whole new, like living in a new world. And anyone who has truly reached that will be like, oh yeah, like you will, it's not a, it's clear, So what is necessary is to understand it's not an easy, simple process. Just watch a YouTube video on how to raise your vibration and you're going to access those spiritual dimensions right away. So you can, of course, like anyone can go out there and let's say, smoke marijuana or do some meditation and have some kind of experience. Remember, don't do that if it's, dangerous or illegal. But anyone, but just because you're doing that doesn't mean, for example, there's a lot of people out there who do stuff like that all the time. A lot of people go out and party and do this stuff. They'll do it every day. And some of those people, and that's not to say, look, I'm not judging, I'm not saying that in a judgmental way. The reason why I'm bringing that up is my point is that some people use these things and it's just like, whoa, that's trippy, man. And they're not raising their consciousness. So they're just like, whoa, look at the lights, look at the patterns, this is so cool. So this is not something that you can just do instantly and do right away. Raising your consciousness takes a lot of, and I've talked about this before, and I'm going to go into more detail in more videos and in other mediums as well. But to truly reach a new level of consciousness, what you need is three things: metacognition, concept networking, and phenomenal experience. This idea of experiencing other dimensions, that's one. That's phenomenal experience. But you need all the others as well. For example, metacognition is self-reflective thought, thinking about itself, and higher levels of metacognition help develop higher levels of awareness. And so, for example, when one is having a phenomenological experience of, let's say, another domain, once one has finished doing that, one will then use metacognition to reflect on those experiences and integrate it and understand what it truly means, how it relates to the world, how it relates to consciousness, how it relates to them, to truly understand it. And then concept networking would be putting it into that fabric and analog of a holistic reality. So to develop a new level of consciousness, one requires the development of an analog all, and this is a model and understanding of reality as a unified, connected whole. But in not just like, oh yeah, I get it, but like really understanding what that means. Because humans at the basic level of self-awareness, they have the concept of an analog I, what Julian Jaynes called the analog I, which is the concept of the I and the self and the me. And then having the concept of the I and the self and the me automatically entails the concept of the other, the different, the not me. Well, this is great because self-awareness needs a lot of tools, but it leads to a lot of problems like hate. Oh, that is a not me. That is an other. That is possibly a threat. What humanity now needs to do is to raise this consciousness and go from simply having an analog I to developing an analog all, which is an internal model of reality being an interconnected whole. Meaning, I understand that that is an other, a not me, but that also, in another sense, it is part of an interconnected whole, and thus it is a reflection of me in the united holistic system that we are in, and thus can live together in a even though we are diverse, live together in a synchronized, harmonic way. So I'm getting a little ahead of myself here. See, there's a lot of vagueness here. Like nothing exists and everything exists. Nothing is possible and anything is possible. There are no truths and everything is true. And it says to me, whatever systems we adopt will work. It will work because anything is possible in the manifest reality story. It'll work. It'll never work because the story only applies to the duality of manifest reality and not to our unknown duality beyond that. You see, my point is that like stuff like this, it's a lot of vague nonsense. It's not going to, it sounds interesting, but at the end of the day, what's really being said here? The idea that nothing exists and everything exists means that all there is forms a totality and a whole, which is perfectly balanced to what one could consider a nothingness. So it's not, it's a fullness, it's an all. And hold on here, let me Okay, so important thing. All right, let's really break this down. Accessing spiritual dimensions, or just other domains of experience. Let's say just other domains of experience. That is really secondary to raising one's consciousness. Because, okay, you access another the domain, you have an experience. So what? Now, that doesn't mean it's not useless. For some people, it sparks a train of thought. Like, oh, I had this experience, and using metacognition and reflecting on that, it has shown me that, let's say, reality is frequency and a holistic world. But if someone is just having an experience and just like, whoa, trippy colors, it's not going to be useful. So the point is that these are tools, and they're very powerful tools. Don't get me wrong. They're very powerful and they're very important, but they're just one of three elements. Phenomenological experience, one of three elements, and this is the easiest one. Debatable whether that's the easiest one. It depends on the person whether that's the easiest one. Actually, depends on the person. But in general, for people who are just looking for like a quick thing, that New Age and mysticism and all that, that is the one that is usually tuned to, because it can be done without a lot of difficult work. So the raising of one's consciousness is the important element to this, because this is what puts you in a new mode. This is what puts you in a mode where you're understanding what these domains are, and you are utilizing them to their full potential. Because when you step into these domains with a new consciousness, it's like the cat or the dog that gains self-awareness, and just like, wow, there's so much more complexity, so much more intricacy, and so much more to the world that I can now understand. And this raising of consciousness is what is going to, what is more important? That's what's going to allow you to transform yourself. That's what's going to allow you to allow us to transform the world, because as humanity raises consciousness, we're going to develop that analog all and start to live in a more connected and harmonious society. Now, I just want to make it clear, like I said, I'm not dissing these experiences. They are some of the most amazing and possibly transformative experiences one can have. But it's just one element of many different things. It's kind of like this. Let's say it's like this. You're a child, you're a baby, you're starting to grow up. Now, imagine that you're not taught anything. You're not taught how to speak. You don't go to school. Nothing. But you're just having an experience of the world as a baby, and you grow up. You go through and you're just having an experience. You're going to have lots of experiences, but what's your consciousness going to be like? You're going to have a really low level of consciousness. You're going to have, on par, close to an animalistic consciousness, because you were never taught how to speak. You were never taught anything at all, but you're having all these experiences. Now, that's not to say experiences are bad. You need to have experiences. Experiences are great. But without that level of raising consciousness, you aren't developing, at least not in a very sophisticated way. So it's the same thing with accessing these domains. Accessing these domains is giving you that experiential element, but it's not giving you the other elements that are necessary as well to begin to raise one's consciousness, develop new understandings of existence, developing new structures of mind, like an analog all, and really having a more full and understanding of reality. So when it comes to all this stuff, keep this in mind, because there's a lot of videos out there talking about raising your vibration and all that sort of thing. And it's very vague, and ultimately just doesn't really get to the heart of what is important. So remember, take away from this that This stuff is very interesting and very fascinating, but remember there is more, and strive to realize and how to use those other tools to make those experiences worth it, to make those experiences be something that adds to your being, that adds to your evolution and adds to your transformation, and ultimately that will add to our transformation as well, because when you develop that analog all and realize, wow, we're all connected, automatically you want to start helping that connectivity. You want to start developing that connectivity, and that includes, you know, talking to others and helping others, because you realize we're all part of one system. You see how that works? When you raise your consciousness and reach that analog all, you become interested in creating connectivity. That's why reaching a new level of consciousness is necessary for creating a planetary civilization and a new world, because humanity is in the individualistic survival stage. Me, other, bad. Whereas you reach this level, you realize this connectivity develops, and you want to start putting things together as an us together, a society, and that naturally develops. And that is what will be required to establish a planetary civilization. Just like animals don't have the capacity to create cities and governments and cultures and institutions. Of course not. Animals are very basic when it comes to group coordination. They can have herds and flocks and packs. It requires a new level of consciousness, self-awareness, to develop governments and cultures and cities and laws and things of that nature. Likewise, just like an animal cannot create cities and governments and all that, humans at a basic level of self-awareness cannot create a planetary civilization. Planetary civilization requires the concept and the development of an analog all, which develops our internal perception and awareness of our internal connectivity to begin to create structures in the world that reflect that. That is what is required for the creation of that new world. So we get a new self and a new world. That's what happens. That's what we need. New self, new world, because it's all linked together. Hey, if you like my videos, please like and subscribe. There are so many more videos on my channel. Go check them out. There's a video that's going to pop up right over here. And if you like my work, consider supporting on Patreon. Helps out a lot. We're having a secret live stream for Patreon supporters after this. That's all about, it's called Is the Multiverse a Gateway Drug? That's what we're talking about. So you'll be able to have, access to that. And the past live streams are the Citadel, which is our Discord server, and a lot more. So consider supporting there. Helps out a lot. I want to give a big shout out to those who do support, especially Philanthropist, Zach, Renaissance Fairy, Cassidy, Michael, Angela, Maria, Top of the World, Ethan, DB, and Joel. The link to Patreon is right here. And another great way to support is by hitting the join button on YouTube right below this video.